So I see that if we go to the previous slide,
Yes.
although I'm not sure where the 266 comes from. I'm looking at TRB 63. So TRB 63 shows an approved project budget of 251.8. And then we're adding the 34, which was the issue we discussed at the last meeting. So we've rebaselined the project budget to 285.8.
Correct.
And so we're being asked to but then we go to the next, so we're at 285.8. And we go to the next slide and we're adding another 19 million, right? We're saying 285.8. Actually, that 34 isn't enough because the 34 got us to 285.8, but now we've identified another 19. So we're at 304.8, right?
Projected, yes.
So what's our budget? Is our budget now, are we adopting a budget at 285.8 knowing that it's $19 million insufficient? Or are we going to adopt a budget of 304.8? Because I don't understand how we could be
So thank you for the question.
having an adopted budget that we know is insufficient.
Yeah, so we're asking for an adopted budget of 285.8 million through fiscal year 1920, which allows us time to come to you with a more informed and more complete cost picture of what will be needed to get to the end of the project. So this is sort of an interim request to give us a little bit more time to get through the activities that I just elaborated so that we can bring to you next year a more complete cost projection of what it's going to take to get to the end of the implementation.
So this is different, though, than the way we've adopted budgets in the past, right? I mean, in the past, we've adopted project budgets through completion, right? So I'm not sure how, I'm trying to figure out what the meaning is of having a budget that just takes us part of the way, knowing that we can't stop there, that we have more money we have to spend because we don't want a partial project. So I'm not sure I understand. I mean, I think we need to be on record as understanding now that we need, subject to future information we might get, that we need 304.8, not 285.8. I think sounds like a confusion that our adopted budget is 285.8, knowing that we're going to actually have to spend a lot more money.
The adopted budget would be through fiscal year 1920, and we know that implementation will go through 2022, so we would come back with the additional budget necessary required to get through implementation at the end of 2022.
And I can maybe add a little bit. One of the reasons why we want to come back a year from now is because we do have to also go back to the legislature with the BCP to get the spending authority, because our spending authority only went through 2020. And so through this, we want to be able to add the 34 million because we're going to encumber the entire portion of that now. But we don't need any additional money to do that other than the $34 million. So we don't want to ask for more money than we need right now. We believe 285 million would take us all the way through 2020 with 19 million surplus still, because we had contingency of 27.9 million already built into the budget. So this next year, we know that 304 is going to be wrong, so we want to be able to be as close as possible when we come back to you and ask for the fully projected budget and have a more closely accurate number when we go back to the legislature and say, we need 30 more months added to the project schedule, and we need to have spending authority for this additional amount of money. So that was one of the reasons why we want to take this year to get a better estimate on that.
I guess then I understand all of that. I just think we have the potential for a lot of misunderstanding and ultimately surprise if we call this the project budget, and it's not the project budget. It's, that's what it says up here. It says project budget. But that's not the project budget. That's just the budget through a certain stage of the project. And I think we need to be very explicit about that. So we're not suggesting that this is the project budget when we know it's not.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point, and we wanted to try to be as illustrative of that in that $304 million slide, because we can see where some of the line items are running short. We want to make sure that we, can provide some sort of visibility into where we see the costs increasing based on what we had estimated originally 5 years ago. And a lot of it is in our internal resources, and the cost for labor has gone up significantly. But I think that's an excellent point. If we called it, our interim baseline, that maybe that would provide clarification. But
well, it's the budget to a specific point in the project, right?
right to 2020.
It's to a milestone in the development of the project, and that's
Right.
that's the way it should be described,
Yeah.
so that we are always fully cognizant of the fact that it's going to cost more than that to
Absolutely.
get to full completion. Okay, thank you.
Understood, thank you.
Thanks for teasing out that additional information, Paul, in your line of questions. I also had, was trying to reconcile the 285 and the 19. So I'm glad someone else had the same questions. And I appreciate staff's additional explanation as to the process and where we are. So I keep going back to quality, cost, and time.
Mm-hmm.
Having never overseen a project of this size before, I don't have any experience. But now I have a little bit. The original budget was a number. We know it's been adjusted, and we know why it's had to be adjusted since the original budget. We know what's been taking place. We know we're not going to just push the button one day and hope it all works. It's going to be these periods of trial. Very helpful, incremental, thoughtful, quality, cost, time. So the increased cost to date has been, we know what that number has been. We now know it's a budget in place that's going to move. How would you have us thinking about what the potential increase could be, the range, from this point to end of project? Does the project become more complex? Are there more risks associated with it based upon the experience that you've had with similar projects and in networking with other folks in the same position that you're in that have already done this? So what could it be? What's an appropriate range to have in my mind, thinking about where we are today and where we might be?
All right. So I'm cautious about giving a number.
Understood.
Right. I think one way to think about the 304 number is if everything went from here through the end of the project exactly the way that everybody plans, and
not gonna happen.
Not going to happen.
Right.
But if it did, that's roughly where you would end up. So you can think about it sort of almost like that's a foundation. It's like a lower bound. Where it might go from there depends on how many surprises. To a certain extent, it's what is unexpected and how well does the project execute. So the execution piece is obviously under the project's control in terms of how well they're able to, write the right people, manage effectively, stay on schedule, because, time has a cost, right? A lot of those costs up there are due to additional time, which is additional staff, that costs money. The piece that's much harder to predict, because it's an unknown, is what kind of surprises might happen. And that's where the risk element is.
So can I just interrupt you on that, Grant?
Yeah.
So the surprises, does the project become more complex as we go further down the
Actually,
path?
less so in a way. You've obviously got the complexity of actually implementing, right? But that's something you can anticipate, you can plan for. In a sense, the project is tackling some of the most complex areas right now. So FR2 is the bulk of the functionality. It's a lot of the more complex functionality. FR3 is a little less so. There's still an opportunity there for, unexpected occurrences, but in many respects, in fact, I think, and that's the point I'm going to make on, my part a little later, if there's an area of uncertainty and risk, particularly around scope and potential impact to schedule and cost, if it's the FR2A part of the first half of FR2, which is the piece that didn't get the benefit of that fit gap exercise that happened in the fall. And so the demonstrations are happening in a couple of weeks, which is going to be talked about in just a minute. That to me is a really strong proof point of what we should expect in terms of surprises. And I think that's going to tell the tale a little bit of where that number is going to go.
I think Cassandra wanted that. Thanks, Grant.
I just wanted to make sure that one point was clear. Is the $34 million that we added for the CGI contract and what we're asking you to augment the budget for is the anticipated expense for CGI all the way through 2022. It's not, we don't plan there's no plan at this point to come back and add more money to that contract. Where I see, just in a very simplistic manner, where I see our biggest risk on additional expenses is making sure that we have the resources on staff to execute what we need to execute to get the system implemented. And that might mean bringing in additional experts and engaging with other vendors to come in to make sure that we can meet our obligation from CalSTR's perspective to get the project moved, to completion. So that's where we see all the additional costs, is because we've had to, like I said, in the internal resources and our external contracts aside from CGI have gone up. Costs have gone up, and the additional time is going to increase those line items. But we may need even more resources to make sure that we get it in place. We want to stay on target. We want to stay on schedule. We don't want to amend the contract with CGI. I don't mind that saying that publicly, because I say it to them every single day, we don't want to give you any more money. But I also want to make sure that we get the system implemented successfully with the expert resources that we need, and that might be from other external contracts. So that's where I see the expenses, and I don't know what that value could be.
Thanks, Cassandra.
Anything else? Okay. So I wanted to talk briefly about some of the experiences we've had with our peers and other pension funds. So these bullets speak to sort of the main themes that have come out in conversations with other pension funds in the US, Canada, and Europe. A number of funds at the conferences I've attended talked about the complexity inherent in the pension industry and in large pension funds driving customization and schedule delays. These are things that we have experienced on this project. These are not unique to CalSTRS. These are things that every other pension fund I've spoken with has experienced on their implementations. One of the other themes that came up repeatedly is the critical nature of testing activities. We are going to start testing activities this year for the first functional rollout, and we will continue testing activities for several years with the subsequent functional rollouts, including, as Graham mentioned, FR2, which is the main functionality of this system. There will be hundreds of people engaged in these activities, working long hours in order to make sure that the system performs as intended. This is another area for those potential surprises, and it's something that the demonstrations that we have scheduled for the coming year are intended to help clarify for us. One of the other themes is the importance of a successful employer rollout. A number of systems do kind of follow that member life cycles. The first rollout, or the first functionality that's introduced, is when a member comes into the system by starting a teaching career. Engaging the employers, making sure they have the appropriate training, making sure that their systems are able to handle whatever new requirements we have in terms of that employee or employer reporting and their contribution submission. So we are focusing a lot of time and energy and attention on making sure that our employer community will experience success as we go through the training process and get ready for that first functional rollout. Other systems also talked about the need to drive innovation in the organization, and this really speaks to some of the organizational change management efforts that we have going on and that those of you in the Benefits and Services Committee will hear about a little bit later today. It's critical for successful implementation to be willing to make changes in the organization, and that's something that we as an executive staff are very focused on and willing to do. And then finally, something that has come to my attention repeatedly is the executive over the benefits area is manual workarounds after go live. So we know that the system is going to automate a lot of things that are currently manual processes. However, there are going to be certain things that we are unable to address because we want to handle that after implementation, or it's very complicated functionality and we need a little bit more time to figure out the appropriate way to address that. We are keeping very close track of those manual workarounds so that when we have a go, no-go decision, we know exactly what that means in terms of the number of staff that we need to have in order to conduct core business. As an example, a large pension fund on the East Coast recently voted to no-go because their manual workload count was too high. And they knew that they wouldn't be able to address those manual workloads sufficiently in a short amount of time. So they decided to wait to implement. So this is something that we will also be keeping a very close eye on as we go through design, testing, and implementation.
Okay. So I just go over quickly 3 or 4 areas where we made a lot of progress, and they are soft launch. The soft launch is our function rollout 1. The team is working very hard, not last 3-4 months from last 3 years, working with the employer. What is the benefits for the new file format? What's working, what's not working? And I'm happy to say that is around 75% of employer community we reach out so far. And we took the feedback from them. We adjusted our overall the file format, and probably will come to you for the regulation because the file format is regulated. So we will come back probably in the fall for the approval, as well as the data conversion. In big, large IT complex project, the data conversion is always just like a surprise in the end that, okay, the conversion is not well. In here, what the approach we took and the team did, that we are taking the members' contribution data, members' data, and in the function rollout 1, every month we are converting the data. So all the fallout, all the data, we are seeing a good progress in there that is not scary or not surprises for later on. Just like Graham and Andrew mentioned, function rollout 2 is our complex rollout. I'm happy to say when we put this one is 75%, but today I got the metrics is 80% complete. There's a lot of hard work in there. I'm not sugarcoating, but it just is a hard function rollout. A lot of challenges in front of us, but the mitigation strategy is working. We put in place in real time, if some resources is crunch resources, we walk through, we move around our resources to pace up with that. And I think this is the area when we will see the demo next week. Andrew and I am seeing the preview tomorrow. But Jack and other staff and all, Jack is especially requested that he wants to see the demo. And I think there's a lot of things, just like we peeling the onion, no surprises for later on. I think that's the way we will know whatever we discussed in last 2-3 years and what is the product looks like. So I'm very positive. We all are very positive that the functionality we'll see early on, not only next week, but every quarter. So the progress is continuously made. Then we'll see. We don't have in the end, okay, is a surprise is coming. So I think this is a good progress we made. I want to give the kudos to the team. They're working very hard, especially the employee readiness, the data conversion team, the design session. It just, you can't believe that every day 2 or 3 sessions sometimes is to keep up with that one is tough, but the team is holding, and there's a lot of backup and all we are providing. That's why I think the resource sometimes is just a crunch.
Okay, so challenges and risks. You'll see a lot of continuity with these challenges and risks as we move through this project, just because what we present to you are the sort of the high level and most critical challenges and risks, and they will tend not to change much over time. So speaking specifically to each one of these in terms of our mitigations. So that successful FR2 launch and related release management, we are working with Grant Thornton along with our IB&V, or Independent Verification and Validation vendor, Maximus, as well as our internal quality assurance team to validate success-based trajectories for key project activities. And just, what that means is we are trying to figure out the most appropriate way to move forward with whatever activity we're currently engaged in, making sure that we are listening to feedback from our oversight and IB&V vendors. And we are also developing strategies for managing post-implementation activities after each functional rollout. So as FR1 soft launch for employer readiness goes live next year, we are already in the planning stages for what we're going to do during that period. And then the continuity of CGI resources, as the slide says, we are working with CGI and Sagitech to make sure that we've got the right people in the right roles. And as Ashish just mentioned, things do suddenly change from time to time, and in real time, we are able to shift resources as necessary to address whatever issues are arising on the project. We're also deploying that soft launch of the employer readiness environment. And I just wanted to quickly say that the strategy for our soft launch of an employer readiness environment it's going to allow the employers a minimum of at least 14 months to access the new system prior to go live and test their own ability to create and transmit files in the new required format. During this period prior to FR2 go live, we will conduct a consultative outreach approach with our employers, provide training, and offer technical support as necessary. In terms of the pressure on scope and budget from the upcoming FR2 demonstrations, we've talked about the potential for surprises from those demonstrations, testing, and the FR3 fit gap activities. We are working collaboratively with our vendor, CGI, to develop guiding principles and a framework for assessing and agreeing upon new scope. We're also working with our IB&V vendor to augment our existing change request process to add additional rigor in terms of cost analysis and scope additions. And then we are also, again, as I just mentioned, working with our vendors to make sure that we're adopting the appropriate paths forward.
Okay, this is the fun part, the metrics. So I think the request came last time. We always go with some indicator, how we will know. We're working very closely with IPOC, the oversight, and find out what is the metrics is appropriate for you, for us. We have tons of metrics, and the project management team working day in, day out to look all these metrics, but what is appropriate for our level and your level. So we'll show you a few. It's still work in progress. We would like to see some indicator in the future. One or two you will see. This is the only time you will see, and we will just want to bring that one up to you. So this one is just give you the financials, where we are to date, how much money we spent, how much left in each bucketed item. We put even the internal staff, all the external contractor and vendors. This metrics looks very simple on the PowerPoint, but behind the scene there are tons of real data, how it is moving, how many vendors we have, how many contractors we have. So this is a good snapshot. It's anytime Cassandra, Jack, me, Andrew, and whoever wants to see our financials, I think we can confidently say where we are today. So it just show you that's the orange item in here. That's the addition of we are adding into the overall budget. This is the evaluation of the requirements. We started the project with this many requirements around 3024, And then based on our discussion for last 2.5 years, we added, we eliminated few. I don't think it will come to you again. I just want to show you that, okay, these are the requirements based on, we started the project and then we're refining those. Then.
Okay. And so in terms of the status of where we're at with each functional rollout, these charts have now been updated through July 6th. And the status remains unchanged from the date on the slide of June 22. So in terms of now that we've adopted that schedule shift, the activities are on schedule and we are on track or within 5% of being on track for FR1 and the related activities along with FR2 and those related activities. And as Ashish mentioned earlier, this is a day-by-day process in terms of keeping on schedule. There's so much going on with FR2 design. And then FR3 hasn't started yet, so naturally that is also on schedule. And then in terms of our next steps, we will continue to refine and enhance the project metrics we just showed you in collaboration with our oversight vendors. We will also look for appropriate ways to engage all of you in demonstrations of system functionality. Once we get through this first demo, we'll have a much better idea of how we can accomplish that. And we're going to add key project leadership resources to support our activities. This includes hiring a project director, which we anticipate doing in the next month or so. And this will help provide senior leadership on the project. We'll also continue to closely monitor and update project costs and projections. As we mentioned, as Cassandra said, we will come to you next year with a budget change proposal for additional time and a more informed cost estimate. And then we'll continue to refine scope mitigation through our design change order and governance process. And this is sort of the surprises that Graham alluded to in terms of moving through the demos, moving through testing, what functionality needs to be enhanced or may need to be altered in order to meet our critical business needs.
So Andrew,
Are there any questions?
Joy has one, and then I have one after Joy.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joy.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. I had a couple of questions on the metrics that you just went through. So on the first graph that shows the project financials, I guess given the issues or the questions that Paul and Harry brought up around where we are with projected additional budget beyond 2020, if there is a way to incorporate that in here so that when you look at this slide, there is sort of recognition that there will be project costs beyond 2020, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, we can add that.
And then on graphs 3, 4, and 5, the ones that show the status of the different functional rollouts, how are you tracking the percentages? I mean, I appreciate that you tried to really get to a quantitative metric, but how do you judge the 5, the 6 to 10, or greater than 10%?
So these are based on our approved schedule, so critical path. So if that one is a 5% or less, then it's a green. So I think we should add in there or within 5% of schedule. So I think it's an overall approved schedule. And if we just touching that one, less than 5% and all, then it's green. Otherwise, we'll go to yellow and the red.
So by schedule, you mean if the design element was due to be completed, I'm being really simplistic, if it's due to be completed on December 1st, but you're running, 2 months late, then you convert that to a percentage and it would be color-coded.
That's correct.
Maybe another way to answer the question, I don't know if you were thinking more about the mechanics of how it's actually done, but the project's using a software program called Microsoft Project, which is a very common tool for project management. And there's, I don't know how many tasks there are on the schedule at this point, but several thousand. And for every one of those, there's a % complete that's tracked. And in certain cases, it's sort of a human being making a professional judgment call of how far we are through. But in other cases, there's actually objective metrics to say this is what this percentage means, because it's, it's creating a number of widgets and how many have you created. And then the tool itself aggregates all of that information and comes up with a % complete for the entire task area or the entire project, and then you can compare that against where you should be at a certain date based on the baseline project, and that's where those numbers come from.
So all those hundreds or thousands of tasks that are associated with FR1 roll up to give us the
Yes.
coding that we see here. And so just as an example, on graph 2, you've got the requirements, and it sort of shows where we are with requirements that are being eliminated or added. Those potentially could affect the status, because if you add requirements or change requirements, it'll flow through the project list you're talking
So
about.
those
and
are
change
already
things.
in the project.
Yes.
But if there are new ones, then yes, it will
Right.
probably have an impact.
Right, and that could affect schedule and other
Exactly.
things. Okay, all right, thank you.
And one of the items you have going forward is to engage us with some of the demonstrations. I can't imagine how excited people are to actually be on the side that's working on it to see those. But I know that there's several of us that are excited about seeing it too. When were you thinking that would happen?
So I think we will have a good idea when we'll see the first one, that what is appropriate for us to bring to you.
Okay.
I think Karen did long time back, but at that time we didn't have those. So we'll see what is, appropriate to bring either in the session, or we can have a private session, so it's, I think, work in progress, but we'll see what is coming and how appropriately we can come either in the fall or early next year. So,
All righty. And does the board have any preference?
Yeah.
If it's a presentation to the whole board, is that something that everyone's interested in seeing, or is that something we should schedule for like a third day? On an off time when we're not meeting, and then whoever wants to go can go. Whole board? It's a huge project. Are you guys excited about it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
All
excited,
right.
I'm
I
excited.
think we'd all like to see it. We'd all like to see it, so we can agendize that into a board meeting.
Yeah, I think we'll
Okay,
in
but-
touch with you and then see
Okay.
how we can, logistically define that piece.
All righty, thank you. Karen?
The only question I have about a board meeting is that we're gonna use real numbers, aren't we? From real people? So how does that affect the private, no?
We use
Okay.
real data, but
Because
we
I
don't
thought
use
you said
PII.
real data, so I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
Please clarify.
It would be dependent on how the demonstration is
Right.
administered. So
Yeah.
the demonstration that you saw, Karen, that you happened to
Was
see
just
last
way
year,
a long time ago, yeah.
that was real member data. But we were in a secure environment, and you're you're
Right.
part of the CalSTRS, leadership team. So you're seeing real data. Now, we wouldn't be able to have that same type of demonstration in a public environment.
Okay, so you'll know more after next week when you do a staff demo to know what exactly we might be asking as well?
What makes sense logistically.
Okay.
You have a layer of security inbuilt, so if it just is a red data we call green data, how we can share the data. So I think we'll come back and then say what is appropriate with which setting, what kind of data.
And then, Brian, if the full board, if it becomes easier using real data, and that's an issue of having that done in front of the public, is there a way that we could do that within closed session?
That would fit within your,
Purview?
your security confidentiality
Okay.
exception, so you
All
can do
right.
that in closed
And
session.
then
So
just
we'll
one,
figure out how you guys want to do that.
just
Go ahead,
one more
Karen.
follow. So I'm just kind of trying to envision what it'll look like. So on the demonstration, then the operator would be like a member? Or
So
a,
no, so right now, we are not talking about the member. Because
Okay.
the member is coming later on. I think
Okay.
we're just talking about our staff, how the staff is taking. And
Okay.
we have to be careful that we're not doing a full-blown demo for everything from
Okay.
A to Z. This is a partial demo to just the functionality which we are talking about at hand. So it's not looks like I'm putting this one, I'm retiring this. So we will come up with some scenario, some cases, and then we will walk you through that piece.
so I guess what I'm asking is what point of view is it taking?
And we have an agenda of what this demonstration is providing, so we can provide it to you, and then with working with Dana and get some
Okay.
input from you on what pieces of those things you would be interested in seeing, because there is a whole list. It's an entire
Okay.
day
Okay. That sounds good.
demonstration, and some of it is interesting and some of it's frankly not, so. But we want it to be valuable, so.
Thanks, Cassandra. All righty, anything else?
No, thank you.
All righty, we have a speaker scheduled for 1 o'clock. We have We scheduled for 35 minutes for lunch. We are running behind. I'd like to take an item break at 12:30 and make sure that we're back here in 1 for our scheduled speaker. So let's go to the consent agenda. That would include, we don't, I'm sorry, back up, because we haven't finished this item yet, have we? I apologize.
Okay, although
I apologize.
I can be fairly brief, but I.
That's
I
okay,
don't wanna-
no, we'll finish this item and then we'll break.
Okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Grant.
I'm
We're
not sure
playing
if,
speed up rules here.
No,
Thank you.
Go ahead, Cassandra.
we need you to take an action on the budget also. So
Yeah.
it was an action
Oh.
item, so let's, maybe before we go.
Is there a second? Enjoy a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Abstentions.
We're making sure that we're identifying it correctly.
I think they heard that, absolutely. All righty. So we've passed the preliminary interim budget, re-baseline budget. All righty. Grant, go ahead.
So, okay, so I'll just say a few things. Firstly, in terms of where we think the project is overall, if you look at it from schedule, cost, scope, resources, all those areas, the project's pretty much on track. They're progressing against the rebaseline plan. If we are sounding a note of caution at all, it's because of the potential uncertainty about what might come out of the demonstrations and some of the activities that are going to occur over the next month or so. And so that's, I guess, this area is sort of the cone of uncertainty. Are we increasing the cone of uncertainty or narrowing it down? We're hoping that going through this demonstration exercise will narrow it down, and it'll be both I think, a morale booster for the project. It'll sort of be a confidence booster, as well as showing that, the software that's being deployed, as incremental as it is, it's only a piece of it, right? And it's only partially built. But what's there is what we expected and what the business users need. But there's always an opportunity that something may pop out of that, and that's where, if we're nervous at all, that's what we're nervous about. So we're watching very closely this next month as these demonstrations happen, and to see whether the project's able to get through those, really showing that the software is functioning the way people expected it to, that there are no significant new areas of scope or areas where CalSys has concerns that the software is not going to be functional, and that those don't impact either the cost or the schedule. If we can get through that exercise and see that, then I think most of these are going to start flipping to green, because we do think at that point the project's on an execution track, and it's really a matter of running the project effectively. I think the only other point I'd make, we've already talked about the risks really around, I think, is the FR2A demos in particular, and what might come up that might impact the schedule. If we had more time, I would love to talk about sort of this whole concept of how you budget. And Paul, I made a very good point about this isn't how, particularly state of California, but also public sector in general, have budgeted, because there's general perception. You ask people what you need to do a 10-year project, and then you come up with a number, and that's what you get for 10 years. And if you don't meet it, then you failed, right? And then people are surprised. So they're taking a slightly different tack, which we are supportive of, but it's a very good point that it's a budget to get you to a certain point, and then you come back and ask for more money. And some of the background to it is you're showing that you've earned the money you've got so far, and that you deserve more, right? So there's a little bit of that in the background. The last point I'll make just on the indicators, I think the information you provided just earlier is a good snapshot of where the project is today, and the data is all accurate. It doesn't really give you the leading piece yet, and that's really what we're looking to work with the project on. Is for example, on the budget piece, it shows exactly how much you spent to date and what the total budget is. It doesn't necessarily say how much did you expect to spend today and how much do you expect to have spent, say, by the end of the calendar year. Those kind of questions it doesn't address. And so that's the kind of thing I think we want to get to, and we'll be working with the project on. So I'll leave it there.
Are there any questions of Graham? Karen?
I just have one more thing.
Sure.
Today's budget, the 34 million, has that been spent already?
No.
Okay, so whenever okay, because that's what I kind of thought, but so then the future, when you come back to us in this next part of it, where it comes to 305 or the 19 million more, so that would be on what we expect to spend and not what we have spent already, right? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Graham? Graham, I wanted to let you know that I think the board really appreciates that you attached to your report is the things that you've been doing in
Yes.
between our last meeting and this, the activities and contributions, and that was something we didn't have visibility of much before. I think we really appreciate it, so thank you.
I do, and you do a lot of work.
You do a lot of work, absolutely. All right, anybody else? Okay, we're going to take a break till 5 to 1. We will definitely start with our speaker right at 1. Chris, are you going to be introducing our speaker? All right, super, thanks.